Welcome aboard, my fellow spelunkers. I am back with another fine selection of shenanigans and bullshit for you this episode. A few of you might have noticed we haven't heard from astronaut Annie in TV talk for a bit, but I did receive a message the other day that she has been stuck out on deep space assignment for the last couple weeks and probably won't be joining us for another couple episodes. That kind of makes my dick soft, but we will pick up where we left off when she returns. I am almost at the end of my look at Wolverine and some shit about, and we'll be moving on to a new topic in the next couple segments, I promise. We have a special edition of Guess That Injury this episode for all the other YMH mommies out there. Spoiler, it's a snapped patella tendon, a broken humerus, and yes, he does have neuropathy issues, though he can come in 4 strokes. I have packed this and a bunch of other goofy shit into this episode, so sit back and relax while I shove it in your face hole.
Telling you some shit about Wolverine, yeah! And let's review. Wolverine is born as James Howlett, a sickly little boy in 1800s Alberta, Canada, and after his powers manifest, he ends up growing up in a mining camp in BC, Canada. After accidentally killing his friend Rose, Wolverine runs feral off into the woods and lives with a pack of wolves until being captured and put into a circus where he meets Mr. Sinister and the Creed siblings, one of which he will end up killing, starting the big feud between him and Victor Creed, better known as Sabretooth. By the 1900s, Wolverine has settled down with his girlfriend Silver Fox in the Canadian Rockies in a nice little cabin. Unfortunately, Sabretooth shows up on Wolverine's birthday to kill Silver Fox, or at least we're led to believe, starting his tradition of visiting Wolverine every year on his birthday to beat him within an inch of his life and say, "Happy birthday, see you next year." The 30s to 50s are probably the busiest part of Wolverine's history until he starts doing the superhero thing, because it seems like he's in almost every battle of every war. World War I, World War II, Vietnam, stuff in South America, stuff all over the place. Cold War shit. He spends a lot of time as a soldier and a spy. This is where he meets Captain America, Nick Fury, and a bunch of other wartime heroes. It is during the late 40s that Wolverine meets Ogun, a samurai master, and begins to train under him. It is also during this period that Wolverine meets a woman named Itsu in Japan and settles down to start a life with her. Unfortunately, this happiness doesn't last long, as Romulus sends the Winter Soldier to kill her. Not realizing that their unborn son had survived, Wolverine leaves Japan, and Romulus raises the unborn child, Daken, as his own. In the 70s, Wolverine joined the CIA and was placed on Team X, a covert ops team of all mutants. He participated in various Cold War-era missions during this time, before eventually leaving Team X. After becoming aware of the government's so-called mutant agenda and finding his own name among those files, and participating in a few missions that had him questioning his implanted memories, Wolverine left Team X for Department K, settling in the Yukon, where he fell into a period of deep depression, drinking, and drugs, eventually culminating in a drunken firing range incident that had him kicked right out of the CIA altogether. It is at this time that Wolverine is abducted by the Weapon X project and subjected to the adamantium bonding process, which bonds the indestructible metal adamantium to his entire skeleton and claws. Wolverine eventually escapes the Weapon X project with the secret assistance of the Winter Soldier, slaughtering everyone on sight in the process, and runs off into the woods, once again, feral. Sometime later, James and Heather Hudson encounter Wolverine while on a honeymoon hunting trip and bring him back to civilization. Using his connections with Department H, James helps Wolverine get his berserker rages under control, a byproduct of his Weapon X programming, and eventually he is able to become an agent again after a bunch of psychoanalysis and a ton of pharmaceuticals. In the wake of the Fantastic Four's first appearance, superhero teams were very much becoming a thing, and James felt that Wolverine would be perfect to head the Canadian super team, Alpha Flight. It is during this time that Wolverine makes his first appearance in the comics, being sent in to take on the Incredible Hulk. Finding not only the Incredible Hulk, but a Wendigo, Wolverine manages to get out of this alive, and this would turn out to be only the first of many such fights between these two. Eventually becoming dissatisfied with how he was being treated by Department H, Wolverine jumps at the chance when Charles Xavier approaches him to leave Alpha Flight and join his X-Men. Staying on with the X-Men after his initial mission, helping to rescue the original team from the living mutant island Krakoa, Wolverine eventually became a core member of the X-Men. Initially clashing with most of his fellow X-Men because of his aggressive personality, Wolverine eventually formed long-lasting friendships and even became a leader of the X-Men for a time. While on a mission with the X-Men in Japan, Wolverine meets and falls in love with Mariko, daughter of a crime lord named Shingen. Shingen does not approve of Wolverine and challenges him to a duel, where Wolverine is forced to kill Shingen. Further complicating their romance, after his death, Mariko inherits her father's criminal obligations, and all of a sudden the criminal underworld is in disarray as everyone struggles to fill the power vacuum. Eventually, their wedding is called off. After an adventure where the world was left believing that the X-Men were dead, Wolverine goes back to Madripoor and takes up his old alias of Patch. What initially began as a flirtation between he and Jean Grey, Marvel Girl, eventually blew up into a full-on attraction and a romantic triangle between he, Jean Grey, and Cyclops, Scott Summers, leader of the X-Men, and her boyfriend. During his time with the X-Men, Jean Grey and Professor Xavier help Wolverine to recover his lost memories of Team X and Weapon X, and he begins to realize that some of those memories were implanted, not real. It's during this time that one of his worst memories, the death of Silver Fox, turns out not to be real when she turns up alive. Wolverine's romance with Mariko comes to an untimely end when Silver Fox poisons her with pufferfish toxin. Her death fucks Wolverine up for many years to come. When Magneto uses his powers to cause a worldwide blackout, Wolverine is part of a team of X-Men that heads to space to confront Magneto in his orbiting space station, Asteroid M. Unfortunately, this mission goes horribly wrong when Magneto uses his powers to yank the adamantium right off of Wolverine's bones, and Xavier angrily wipes Magneto's mind clean. They wouldn't realize this till much later, but this is the moment that Xavier created the psionic entity, Onslaught. Wolverine wouldn't have survived this experience if not for Jean Grey's telekinetic powers holding his body together as they escaped back to Earth. As it was, he was left a shell of his former self, his healing factor, all but burnt out. With his memories before the Weapon X project pretty murky, it came as a surprise over the course of his long, slow recovery when Wolverine realized that his claws had actually been bone this entire time. Wolverine eventually makes a full recovery, and his healing factor comes back stronger than ever, now that it no longer has to compensate for an adamantium skeleton. Unfortunately, around this time, the villain Genesis, stepson to Cable and kind of a wannabe Apocalypse, abducts Wolverine and attempts to rebond his skeleton with adamantium. He wants to make him sort of his own horseman. Unfortunately, this doesn't go super great for him because Wolverine escapes and kills him and all of his henchmen and runs off. Driven more feral than ever before by the stress of this process, Wolverine's healing factor transforms into a weird, monstrous new form with spiky claws, pointy ears, and for some reason, no nose. Sometime later, Wolverine is abducted by the actual Apocalypse and forced to fight Sabretooth to find out who would be his new horseman, Death. Wolverine wins and is brainwashed and rebonded with adamantium to become the new horseman, Death, for Apocalypse. Working with the alien shape-shifting Skrulls, Apocalypse has him secretly replaced with a duplicate, and the X-Men are none the wiser. This ruse is eventually revealed, however, and with the X-Men's help, Wolverine is able to shake off Apocalypse's brainwashing and return home. During his time with the X-Men, Wolverine never stopped looking for answers in his past, and eventually Weapon X was revealed to only be a small part of the overall Weapon Plus program, which actually began with Captain America, Weapon 1, meaning that Weapon X is actually Weapon 10. When a Magneto impersonator attacks the X-Men and has sent Wolverine and Jean Grey in a space shuttle hurtling toward the sun, Wolverine is forced to kill Jean Grey so that she can be reincarnated as the Phoenix and save them both. When Wolverine appears to be linked to a series of strange murders, further investigation reveals the existence of X-23, or Laura Kinney. Laura is a female clone of Wolverine created from blood samples by the Weapon X project. She is taken in by and eventually becomes a member of the X-Men. At a time when he is already on a couple different X-Men teams, Wolverine is asked to join the Avengers, and he does. This leaves him spread a little thin, but he manages to make it work. And then the House of M storyline happens. In this, Scarlet Witch creates an entirely new reality where mutants ruled the world, and everything seemed kind of perfect. Unfortunately, Wolverine still seemed to have memories of his old life, and he actively worked to figure out what the heck was going on, eventually figuring it out, and the whole thing came crashing down. When everything returned to normal, all of a sudden, all of Wolverine's memories came back. This marks a pretty big milestone for who Wolverine is as a character, because up until this point, that's who he's been, a man with a fractured past, with memories that didn't always make sense and sometimes contradicted each other. That all is over now. Wolverine remembers everything. It's at this point Romulus, the man that's been manipulating Wolverine for years, reappears and makes his presence known in his life. This also leads to a confrontation with who Wolverine believes to be Sabretooth, ultimately turning out to be a clone, and they have an ultimate confrontation, during which Wolverine uses the Muramasa blade to behead Sabretooth. Shortly after the reappearance of Romulus, D'Ken made his presence known, and tried repeatedly to kill his father, having been poisoned by Romulus to believe that Wolverine had abandoned him. Disagreeing with how Cyclops used untrained students to defend the school, feeling they weren't ready and likening the whole thing to child soldiers, Wolverine split off from the X-Men and started his own school, the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning, taking a few of the X-Men with him when he went. This was referred to as the Schism, where Wolverine decided to concentrate more on the school aspect, teaching the next generation and kind of keeping them away from the larger mutant conflict. Cyclops decided to go another way, becoming a lot more militant and extreme in his actions, almost Brotherhood of Evil Mutants-like, and eventually he even attracted the attention and loyalty of Magneto himself. This brings us within the last 5 years of publication, and there's a ton of stuff I glossed over and outright missed, and there's a bunch of stuff after the last stuff I just described that's happened that I'm just not going to get into. I'll be honest, I've been talking about Wolverine for several episodes, and I just want to move on to something else. I'll probably revisit the old Knucklehead at some point, but let's talk about some new shit. Next episode's topic on some shit about is going to be the Xenomorph, the alien from the Alien series. It's going to be a cool one, and I'm going to start keeping these down to 1 episode per topic. I stole your meme! Welcome to Bovalii. The Lords of Bovalii. Mankind has been on the decline since the last Great War, which is part of how the hidden races were able to return to the world. But there are still pockets of men in the world. These men in particular are the landowners of the human lands of Bovalii, the elder having been honored in the cities with several statues and such. The elder man is Sir Zachariah Bonaventure, and in recent years he has divided his kingdom, under his rule as royal proxy to the king, between his two sons. Ruling from the capital city in his golden years, Zachariah has delegated most of his stately duties to his older son Roberto, and his younger son Wilhelm oversees the peasants and farmers more directly. King John Wang XV. Carrying on as ruler in his honored ancestor's name, John XV is the benevolent ruler of the human kingdom. As he and his people have done for centuries since returning to the surface, mankind travels the world in their massive city ship, hoping to claim a new homeland. Bovalii is one of the rare places in the world that took people in and gifted them lands to farm and rule, but there were limits placed on human immigration, and the entire scenario remains unique in all the world. Augmented with various half-understood defensive technologies from the old world and continually upgraded whenever possible, the city ship of man is a land unto itself. Mankind may no longer have a homeland to call its own, but there isn't a military force on Gaia that could challenge its defenses. Humans are one of the more recent additions to Bovalii, having only returned to these lands within the last 500 years. A telling difference between the other peoples and man is their reception upon arrival. While many first contacts between the races of man go poorly, in Bovalii the human colonists were welcomed and given lands by the peoples there. While severely depleted by the fall of man, the human race is still extremely adaptable and relentlessly horny, and so several racial variants and hybrids with other races have sprung up over the centuries. Paid for by the Bovalii Tourism Board. Guess that injury! One more time! Bye, Mommy. Thanks, Jeans.
Stop lock reading, cha-cha-cha. Stop lock reading, cha-cha-cha.
Niles Steiger, a.k.a. Abyss. Height, 6'4". Weight, 162 pounds. Eyes, white. No visible irises or pupils. Hair, black. The cells of Abyss's body were extremely pliable, allowing him to unravel it into ribbon-like tendrils with which he could envelop a target and pull it into the interdimensional portal within his body. High emotional states, such as fear or anger, could cause Abyss to lose control of his power, resulting in all nearby objects being pulled into the dimension. Abyss briefly utilized bionic tendrils prior to his being repowered. Place of origin, Genosha. First appearance, Cable number 40, 1997.
I love cancel culture because it implies that people can't learn from their mistakes or evolve as people while further radicalizing them back into the negative space from which their mistake was made, while oftentimes creating even bigger monsters. It's almost as if people want the public perception of being a good person more than they actually want to be a good person, so we like to ruin people's lives forever. That being said, Jared from Subway is definitely still canceled. Woo!
Cool stuff. Slick stuff. Neat stuff.